Hey guys, welcome back to the Pageant Project. Before I get into it, special offer. I have been working behind the scenes on a piece of software that allows me to do certain things in mock interview that no one's ever done before. But I need a guinea pig. So if you are someone, now I want the guinea pig to be someone who actually is going to be competing in a pageant, because if I ask you an interview question, it's very difficult to answer when you're not actually entered in a pageant, or you don't at least intend to enter a pageant. So I'm looking for a guinea pig who'd be willing to go through a 30-minute mock interview session with myself, and get to see some cool things. I like to think they're cool things, working on behind the scenes. It is to do with AI, but not in the way that you think. And I've been working on this, as I said, behind the scenes, but I need someone to test it on. And you also need to be willing for me to record the session and potentially show it on socials or on a Substack email newsletter and that. So if you want to work on your interview, I can absolutely promise that you'll get huge value from it. There's a reason I had 10 people from Miss USA, 10 of the girls from Miss USA and Miss Teen USA book in, even though they had their other coaches. And, they were all, let's say they were pleased at the very least. And that's putting it mildly. So, and it's coming up to, 2026. So if you have a pageant that you've entered, you're looking to compete in 2026, and you want to work on your mock interview with yours truly, and you want to have a bit of fun and maybe see what the cutting edge or the bleeding edge of pageantry might look like that future, send me a DM, I think, or send me an email on info@thepageantproject.com. I think you know the way these things work by now. If you've been a subscriber for any period of time, or you've been listening to the podcast, send me that DM sooner rather than later, because it's Tuesday night, late Tuesday night, as I'm recording this, and I really want to have something to put up by Thursday. I know that doesn't give you a lot of time, but yeah, that's the way. That's the offer. So, and maybe I'll extend it later on, but that's the offer for now. So send me a DM or an email if that's you. Now, speaking of mock interview, what I wanted to get into today, I had a mock interview session with a young client. I think she's 19. She's just out of teen, and is about to compete in her second Miss competition. And her mum sent me a DM on Instagram and asked me if I did mock interviews for Miss Earth USA. Now, to be fair, there's not a huge amount of difference between doing a mock interview for Miss Earth USA as opposed to Miss USA, as opposed to Miss America. Obviously, the lengths are different and some of the questions are going to be different, but the fundamentals of a good answer are the fundamentals of a good answer. And even more fundamentally than that, the fundamentals of good communication are in common. There are certain things that you need to do. You need to be articulate. People need to be able to understand what you're saying. You need to be able to put your point across. You need to be good at using storytelling. You need to be good at capturing attention. All those sorts of things. They're common across the board. I think there's a lot less different across pageant interviews for different system. There's a lot less different, and there's a lot more in common than you might think. But I messaged the mother back and said, yeah, sure, absolutely. But I like to, this actually hurts my ability in some ways to make money, because I often say to the person, I want to get on a call, especially in this case. I said, I want to get on a call with your daughter first to get an understanding of what the issue really is, and also to see if I think I can help. And it's very difficult, even if you're a parent listening to this and you know that your daughter may need some sort of help, if it only comes from you, it can be a battle, because your daughter may not think that she needs help, even though you might think it, and even though she needs it. That's just human nature, right? If someone sort of gives you help or forces help upon you when you haven't asked for it, sometimes you can react negatively to that, even though it's come from a good place. And so I really wanted to get on a call with the daughter, find out from her, because she's the one that's been in the interview room and she's the one that's gotten the feedback, find out from her what she thought the issue was. And the issue revolved around a piece of feedback which is confusing to me, which is needs to show more personality. Another one of the pieces of feedback that this person had gotten was that the judge thought that she was simply telling them what they wanted to hear. Now, after having spoken to the daughter even for 5 minutes, I can tell she wasn't that sort of person. And so the part that confused me is my client, my coaching session is always a bit of a fact finding mission at the beginning because I really need to find out what's going on. I don't want to just start working on something and it's not the actual thing that needs to be worked on, if that makes sense. The part that didn't make sense to me was that this client had actually scored really, really well in interview, but there was also always a judge who said she needed to show more personality or she sounded too rehearsed. That was the other one, right? Show more personality, sounded too rehearsed, um, or sounded like she was just saying what she thought the judges wanted to hear. And so that didn't really make sense because if you are bad at interview, you will score badly, right? Pretty probably from everyone. So it confused me that she could score so well from most of the judges, but that also there was always a judge who thought she didn't show enough personality or sounded too rehearsed, etc., etc., etc. And so I dug in, and I had. It didn't take long for me to sort of understand, I think, what might be going on. But the issue with this sort of advice, right? Or feedback. When you get the feedback that you sound too rehearsed, but you actually haven't rehearsed, it's very confusing because in this young woman's case, she actually hadn't practiced interview that much, which just shows, how good she was naturally in a way. But she said that she'd maybe rehearsed a few times, she'd had a few coaching sessions, but by no means was she the sort of person who had remember or memorized her answers. And so when you get feedback that you sound too rehearsed, but you haven't rehearsed, understandably, that's not only confusing, it's incredibly frustrating because the thought process goes, what do you mean I sound rehearsed? I haven't rehearsed. Like, what do you want me to sound like? Do you want me to stumble over my words? Is that what you're saying? And it's the same thing when it comes to personality. When someone says you don't show enough personality, it's kind of almost like a personal insult. Like, well, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to be a stand-up comedian and be wacky and out there and be entertaining? Because otherwise, that's not my personality. And I interviewed Zoe McGrady later on today, and it was interesting because she had the exact same issues in pageantry, which that she spoke very well, very intelligent, and very impressive, but it was almost like that worked against her some of the time in pageantry because intelligent and impressive to some judges can come across as you're showing off, and so they mark you down. But here's the thing: they don't say in the feedback, at least 99% of the time, they won't say in the feedback, oh, she sounded like she was showing off. They will use language that's softer, like, oh, she needs to be more relatable, she needs to show more personality. And frankly, it would help you guys more if they actually said what they meant, because then you might not even agree with their sort of appraisal of your ability. You might look at them and go, well, that's fine. You can think that, but that's me, and I don't want to change that. But unless you really understand or you decode, it's a bit like a mystery, right? You need to decode what the judge sometimes is really saying and what the feedback really means, because otherwise, how are you going to work on it? If you're told that you sound too rehearsed when you haven't rehearsed, how do you work on that? You can't. I mean, if you practice more, you're going to be more rehearsed. And then if you do that, and then people say, "Oh yeah, you sound really spontaneous," now you're really confused, right? And I think this happens more often than we think, and it's because judges are just like you. And by that, I mean, sometimes judges don't articulate their thoughts particularly well in the interview room, particularly when they're under time pressure. They need to write something down and they don't really know how to write it, or they're afraid they're going to come across as too harsh. And so they write something else. But it would actually be more helpful if you knew what they thought, right? At least from my perspective. So I know what to work on and I'm not wasting my time. And so What it came down to was when someone tells you you're not showing enough personality, in this case anyway, what it really boiled down to was, I think what the judge was saying was that my client needed to be more relatable. Now, that's something you can work on more because, and it was kind of like a riff session with this client. I was going back and forth, and I said, "Well, how how are you relatable? Like, how do you portray relatable?" Because it's one thing to go from need to show more personality to, okay, I think what that means is I need to be more relatable. Then how do you do that? And my opinion was that, well, if you're going to be relatable, you need to show that you have things in common with other people. And different people across the world have different vocations, different occupations, different hobbies. So it's unlikely that you can have one hobby, for example, and everyone will relate to you. But what we can relate to all as human beings, one of the things is that we all have our struggles. We all have our moments of doubt. We all have our ups and lows and, highs and lows. And life is rarely a straight line. There's that saying, if you want to laugh, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And I think that's really, really true. So one of the commonalities that all of us humans have is struggle. And you see that in a lot of movies, for example. It's all about the struggle and overcoming it. The hero needs or the heroine needs to grow because they're not enough at the beginning to overcome the enemy or the obstacle. So there's a lesson they need to learn. They learn it. And then, the typical Hollywood story arc anyway is that they overcome the obstacle and then they live happily ever after. But to be relatable, you need to show that you're not perfect. And to do that, you have to share a struggle. And it's funny, it turned out when I asked my client, remember, she's only, I think, 19. I said, how often have you talked about struggles, things that you struggle with during your interview? And her response was pretty immediate, pretty visceral. She didn't want to do that. She didn't see the point of it. She I think he basically said, why would anyone want to hear about my problems? And look, I get that. Coming from the upbringing that I had, I can certainly understand that because you really weren't supposed to complain. Like whatever happened, I was like, well, that's your problem. You get on with it. No one here owes you anything, right? That was the upbringing I came from, and so I could understand that. But you got to think about it. And everyone's different. Every judge is looking for something different. But think about it from the point of view of a judge who's looking for someone who's super relatable. And you have a young woman come in. She doesn't talk about any of the struggles she's had. She's very intellectual. She's very impressive. Can you imagine the sort of judge who might see that as, oh, she's showing off? Oh, she's just telling us what we want to hear, right? Now, I'm not saying that my client was doing that, but it's the perception of the thing. And so now I've said this many, many times before. You go, well, how do I work on that? It's very simple. You need to record your mock interview. You need to record your answer with a video. One answer, watch it back. One answer, watch it back. And each time you're watching it back, you're learning, you're growing. The thing that was scary to me was I asked my client, how many times have you seen yourself interview? The answer was zero. Now, that is really scary to me because that to me is a massive blind spot. If I'm going into a situation and I don't know what I look like or how I sound, I get really antsy because I do not think, I know that I don't, but I also think you do not want to simply rely on other people telling you that everything is hunky dory, everything is okay, and that you're perfect, everything is perfect the way it is. Just keep doing you. And, God forbid they say, oh, be yourself. This is useless advice that doesn't help anyone unless you're sort of the person who just wants to be told compliments, in which case I don't have much of a conversation for you. Because for me, it's about, yes, you don't want to work with someone who's tearing strips off you, but you need the constructive feedback, right? And by the way, during the Miss USA mocks that I did, that was a common thread. The girls were kind of sick of getting the meaningless compliments and they wanted actual feedback, things they could improve. Sometimes, by the way, what they needed to hear was, you're ready, stop practicing, stop overthinking. But that's still feedback. It's not telling them everything's perfect, just keep doing what you're doing. And so the long story short, we got to the point where I think I identified. Now, I'm not 100% certain that this is correct, and I'm not 100% certain that my advice landed, to be completely frank. But the other flip side, the reason why I think I got it right in the end was because my client had worked with a very well known, another very well known pageant coach in the United States. And, I respect for what he does. I don't know him that well at all. I know his name. And I asked, well, what feedback has he given you? And she thought about it for a moment because I was talking about all this sort of non-verbal stuff. It was the psychology of it. It was a how you come across, not just what you say. It's not what you say, it's how you say it as well. And it turns out that how you say it's actually more important than the what you say. And she said, oh, he's given me lots of good feedback on the verbal stuff. So I said, okay, what advice? That's great. What advice has he given you on the non-verbal stuff? Oh, nothing. That that should really make you think, right? Who are you working with? Because if we say that, and I'm not throwing any shade at this coach whatsoever, because maybe it wasn't relevant at that time, and maybe the verbals needed to be handled first. But if you are working, if you know that it's not just what you say, it's how you say it, and you're paying good money to a coach who only ever works with you on what to say and doesn't really have any feedback on how you say it, if it was me, it would really make me think, okay, I'm missing something here. And maybe I need to go, at least maybe not swap coaches, but I need to go to another coach, someone who can help me out with this stuff that really matters. And this is why I keep saying you need to record your interviews and watch it back, because it's not about me telling you how you should sound or what you should say. What really matters to me is you have some idea of what you want to look like and how you want to sound and what you want to say. If you have no idea of any of that, it really, I'll give you a silly analogy. It's like you trying to learn how to drive a car, but you're blindfolded. And I'm the only one who's allowed to see. And you're relying on me to tell you what's coming. And by the way, you have to drive 60 miles an hour at least. Otherwise, it's like that Speed movie where if you drop below 60 miles an hour, the bomb arms and you're going to blow up, right? That to me doesn't sound like a huge recipe for success. That just sounds, another analogy is like trying to drive into the future, drive forwards whilst using your rear view mirror. You're going to crash. And so I want you, and I'm now fully convinced that I'm in the minority on this, but I want you as a coach to have a full understanding of what your journey forwards needs to be. You are the one who is in charge of setting the vision here, not me. I can help you set it, but it cannot be my vision. You need to take ownership of that. And then it's my job as a coach not to tell you what your vision is, but to help you execute on your vision. But my point to this, whether it's your interview or whether it's you're on stage or whether it's anything else, if you are completely reliant on other people telling you what's right, what's wrong, where are you in all this? I mean, we keep talking about you need to be yourself, you need to bring your unique story, your unique perspective. Everyone has their place, etc., etc., etc. But if you were just mimicking, like I feel like sometimes I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to your coach by proxy. And it's not quite that bad, but sometimes it feels like that in pageant interview, especially because I don't get a real person. I feel like I'm speaking to some sort of mouthpiece, someone who has been overcoached. But more problematic than that, it's someone who doesn't know themselves, who hasn't heard themselves, hasn't seen themselves, and is just putting on a performance that they think I want to see or hear. And that is never going to work because it doesn't sound like you. Yes, you may fool the one judge who doesn't really know what's going on. Who knows? I don't know. But it's not going to work past that, and it's not going to work in life. Because let's be honest, people's detection radar for knowing when someone's being inauthentic is better than it's ever been. Because it has to be. Think about it, the environment that we're living in, the age that we're living in, there's so much now that looks real that isn't. Look at AI. It's getting harder, for example, to know when something is real or not. Like I'm looking at some of these videos now, and The only reason I know it's AI is because I look at it and go, that doesn't seem very likely. And now I'm looking for, because all these AI videos have a watermark that goes around, but what some people do is blur it out. So now what you're looking for is a sequence of pixelated pixels that moves around the picture. But if I didn't know that, I would think the video I'm seeing is real. And so the BS radar, right? The BS radar is more attuned than it's ever been. So if you think you can go into an interview without having ever worked on what you sound like and how you sound, and knowing that the version you're portraying is what you want to do, it's not what your coach told you to do. It's no, I want to sound like this. I want to get this point across, and I'm confident that this is the way I want to show up. Unless you've done the work into that, then you're going to come across as too rehearsed or doesn't show enough personality. And look, at the end of the day, what I'm suggesting to you, it costs less money, but it's actually harder in some ways, because you got to look at it yourself and you have to do some self awareness. You have to do some digging. It's personal development, but of the best kind, because it forces you to really have a look at yourself and go, oh, I don't like that. Or, Joe, I wish I would stop doing that. And then it forces you to think, okay, well, what do I want to sound like? And so then you go on a bit of a deep dive and you look for great communicators. You look for great pageant interview answers and you go, I like how she did that. I like how she did that. Oh, I don't like how she did that. And so it's an ongoing process of refining your craft. It's a lot easier now. It costs money, but if you have money or your parents are paying for it, it's much easier to hand the money over to a famous coach who has coached many, many Miss USAs and say, oh, you just tell me what to do and I'll do it because, you're the expert and you know best. No, it doesn't work like that. Again, analogy, right? As I said, you want to drive, but you got to be blindfolded and you got to rely on someone else to tell you what's coming up. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if that other person's vision is 2020. It's still not going to work. Eventually, you're going to crash because you don't know what's going on. And so, what I need you all to do, and I know that maybe there'll be 5%, 10% of you who will be even willing to do that. You'll listen to this and go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And then you won't do any of it. But to the 5% or 10% of you who are actually listening and are willing to try something out, and you're also, by the way, you're probably on that borderline of crazy, but in a good way. Like you're the person who always wants to find things out yourself, and you like this process of self discovery and getting to get all that information and assimilate it and play with it. And it's like that self taught thing, right? And some of the greatest geniuses in the world, by the way, a lot of them are self taught. They didn't come through conventional means. And that's another way of saying they just got passionate about something and they got good at it faster than any coach could have taught them. That was me with tennis. I've said this, by the way, many, many times, but I would never been as good at tennis as I am. And but I'm not a pro, but I had no talent. And there's no way that any coach would have taken the time that it would have taken to get me as good as I am now compared to me doing it myself. But it was a process because you try a few things and it doesn't work. And then you got to look at yourself again and again and again. And yeah, you get faced with the actual reality of that's actually what I look like. That's actually what I sound like. This is what people have been seeing. This is what people have been hearing. And you can't hide because it's objective reality. But look at it from a different point of view. That's power because you're not walking around blindfolded anymore. You know your truth. You know what you sound like. You know you've done the work. And by the way, doing this work will help you craft better interview answers because you're going to find out so much about yourself during this journey. It's going to build your self awareness. And if there's one quality I wish everyone had going to that interview room, it's self awareness. You can't throw me for a loop with an interview question, no matter how smart you think you are, because I've done so many interviews now and it's all been about building self awareness. I may not go into an answer in complete detail because it might not be appropriate given the setting, but there's not going to be an answer a question that you could ask me that really throws me just because I've done so many of these and I've had to watch myself so many times. It is a massive process of growth, of personal development in the best sense. And as you do that, not only do you get all the benefits of you've seen yourself, you've worked on yourself, you know how you sound, how you come across, you also have the massive benefit of self-awareness, which is not something you will get, by the way, if you're just doing what your coach tells you to do, because you're not going through that growth process. You're just going through the mechanics of it. It's like me telling you, okay, you're going to go to the gym, you're going to do bicep curls, and then you go do these Romanian deadlifts, then you're going to do some pull-ups, and I want you to run for half an hour, and you just do it. But you never ask why. But guess what happens? Maybe 5 years from now, the body that you get or the fitness you get, you're nowhere near it. And now you get mad because you've been doing what you've been told for 5 years and you still aren't where you are. But you never took the time to, again, have that vision for yourself and put the hard work into it yourself. And it is hard. It's free, but the price of admission is your vision, is your willingness to confront your own weaknesses, your own flaws, and honestly to and comb through stuff on the internet, on YouTube, whatever it is, and determine what it is you want. What is it that you want? How do you want to sound? What do you want to sound like? Don't tell me, oh, I want to win Miss USA. Okay, that's fine. But how are you going to do that? What sort of communicator do you want to be? So give this some thought. And as I said, I think only 5 or 10% of you would actually be willing to do this. But those are my people. If you're listening to this and you're going, yeah, that's me. That's how I do things. I don't normally just wait for someone to hand me stuff on a silver platter. I go and make stuff happen. Then you're my sort of people, and I appreciate you. But, well, no, but that's my story for today. You're welcome. The end. They lived happily ever after. Do the work. If you have never recorded yourself giving an interview answer, if you've never recorded yourself doing your walk, you're crazy, but not in a good way, because you are going around blindfolded and you're probably going to walk into a wall somewhere or walk off a cliff and just be really, really shell shocked when it doesn't go your way. And you go, but I did all the work. Yeah, you did the work, but not the work that actually needs to be done, which is that bit of introspection. So give some thought to what I've said. If you want to be my guinea pig, you want to work on that stuff that I've been, work with me on a mock interview with the stuff that I've been working on behind the scenes. As I said, half an hour, just be okay that, I may share bits and pieces of it. It'll be fun. It'll be very informative for you. And you'll be the first people to see it. And, if it goes well, and I certainly hope it does, then I'll be doing that moving forwards and offering that as a service to the general public, so to speak. But I want to test it on a more select audience first. And you guys are that select audience. So if that interests you, send me that DM, send me that email, info@thepageantproject.com. But do it as soon as you hear this, because I'm recording this Tuesday. This going out Tuesday night, Sydney time, Australia time. And I need this to be done within the next probably 24 to 36 hours. So let me know. Think about what I've said here. And if that sounds like you, then you're my kind of person. Keep doing you.